Hi class, today we're going to focus on writing body paragraphs for an argumentative essay. So just to take a quick look back, we have already talked about introductions for argumentative essays and all the components of that introduction. So we're going to start with a hook, which could be a question, a quote, an anecdote, maybe an interesting fact. Then after we have our reader's attention, we're going to provide some background information. So anything you feel like your reader needs to know ahead of time to better understand your essay. We're going to introduce the counterclaim in the introduction, which is different than anything we've done before. So here we're not going to state how we feel, we're actually going to state the opposing view. And then in our thesis, we're going to quickly refute that counterclaim and state how we feel about the issue. And also in our thesis, we're going to include the 3 main reasons why we feel the way we do. Those 3 reasons will be the main idea for each body paragraph. Now, for the body paragraphs in this argumentative essay, we're going to use double pie paragraphs. We're also going to make sure that we include 3 body paragraphs. So each of those body paragraphs will begin with a point. And again, that should come directly from the thesis. We're going to introduce text wherever necessary. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then we're going to include our first piece of evidence or illustration. We'll explain how that illustration supports our point. We're going to provide a second illustration to prove our point and explain how that illustration supports our point. After we're finished with those 3 body paragraphs, then we will move on to our conclusion, where we'll use concluding words and restate our main points. But today we're going to look a little bit deeper at those body paragraphs. So each of my 3 body paragraphs is going to start with a point or a claim. So this is going to be my first reason why I'm taking the stance that I'm taking. So I will start by using a transition word which indicates position. So good transition words to begin each of these 3 body paragraphs are listed here. So I can use first, second, third. I can use to begin, additionally, and finally. I can use initially, subsequently, and finally. And you will notice that I've capitalized each of those words and included a comma to help you remember to do the same. After I use a transition word, then I'm going to introduce the text that I'm going to be referring to in that body paragraph. Now, this is a little bit different. We're not going to use a quote lead-in like we've used in the past. Instead, we're going to introduce the text that we're going to be quoting with a summary topic sentence where we name the text, verb it, and then explain the text. So we're going to provide the central idea of the whole text. Now, if you're going to quote a text or refer to a text more than once in your essay, you only need to introduce it once. After that, if you want to refer to the text again, you're just going to refer to it by the title or the author's last name, and then you'll give your evidence. And again, I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. After you've used a complete sentence to introduce your text, then you'll provide your illustrations. So for this first illustration, we would like you to use either a direct quote or paraphrase a quote. So again, you don't need a full quote lead-in because you've already introduced your text. So you'll just say something like this in the article, and then you'll say the author's name, and then you'll use a verb like states, writes, or explains, and then you can insert your quote or your indirect quote here. Your next sentence will explain how that illustration supports your point. And here's a sentence starter that you can use to do that. Then you're going to use a subtle transition to provide another piece of evidence to support your claim. So you're not going to use transition words like you would use for the beginning of your body paragraphs. You want to use something like also or moreover or furthermore, and then provide another piece of evidence. This could be evidence coming from the same text that you introduced earlier. It could be evidence coming from a different text, which means you'll have to introduce that before you provide your illustration. It could be a personal example. It could be something hypothetical, where you want your reader to imagine if something happened. And then finally, you'll explain how that second illustration supports your point for the whole body paragraph. So let's look at an example. So going back to my examples on sharks, I've created a body paragraph. This would be the third body paragraph in my essay because you can see that I'm starting with the word finally. I'm going to start this whole paragraph by making a point. Then I'm going to introduce the text that I'm going to use in orange. You can see I have two orange sentences, and the reason is because I'm using two different articles to prove that point that I wrote in pink. The illustration is highlighted in green, so you can see that this first illustration includes a direct quote, but this second illustration includes an indirect quote. So what I'm trying to do here is use a combination of the two. I don't always want to use direct quotes. I don't always want to use indirect quotes. I really want to mix things up so that my writing doesn't become too repetitive. And then in my blue sentences, I'm explaining how those illustrations support that first pink point. So let's listen to what this sounds like. So if you think back to my introduction, you'll remember that I'm trying to prove that releasing chemicals into the ocean to repel sharks is a bad idea. So I'm going to start by making my point, and I'll say, finally, creating chemicals in an attempt to repel sharks is dangerous because they may provide a false sense of security for beachgoers. That came directly from my thesis. Now I'm going to introduce my text. The article, Dead Shark Spray Keeps Jaws Away, on newscientist.com explains the dangers in making and distributing chemicals to repel sharks. And now I'm going to illustrate. The article states a chemical shark repellent can send animals packing, but won't prevent surprise attacks on surfers and swimmers. Now I'll explain. This indicates that the spray is not enough to keep humans safe from sharks. For the second half of this pie paragraph, I want to support my point with evidence from a different text. So I have to introduce that text, which is why I have another orange sentence here. Furthermore, the article Live Sharks Repelled by Dead Ones on CBSNews.com shares some additional concerns with the shark repellent. Eugenie Clark, a shark expert from the University of Maryland, was quoted in the article and stated that shark attacks are rare, and the chance that the person being attacked would be ready with the repellent in hand is even more rare. Now I'm going to explain that indirect quote. This indicates that people could feel safe with shark repellent available, but the likelihood of them having it and using it when needed is incredibly small. So again, this is just an example. There are many different ways that your body paragraphs can look. Maybe you're only using one text, which means you would only have one orange sentence. Maybe your second illustration is a hypothetical example or a personal example, in which case you wouldn't have to introduce text at all. So good luck in writing your body paragraphs. You have a lot of flexibility here. There's a lot of different ways that you can set these up. What we really want to make sure you are doing is including a point, introducing your text at least in the first part of your pie paragraph, providing some kind of textual evidence, explaining, and then transitioning to a second illustration, which could come from the text, could be a personal example, or could be a hypothetical example, and then go ahead and explain that at the end. Good luck. Let us know if you have any questions.